The knife glinted under the streetlight as it plunged toward the woman's chest. In that split second, Ethan Cole made a choice that would shatter everything, throwing his broken body between a blade and a stranger he'd never met. Blood bloomed across his torn jacket as metal met flesh, but his eyes remained locked on hers, fierce with a protection he couldn't explain. He didn't know she was Claire Donovan, the billionaire CEO whose empire controlled half the city. He only knew that in this moment, on this rain-soaked street, someone needed saving, and he was all she had. If you're watching from your city tonight, drop a comment below and let me know where this story has reached. Now let me tell you how a single father's sacrifice became the beginning of something neither of them saw coming. The rain had been falling for 3 hours straight, turning the streets of downtown Chicago into rivers of reflected neon. Ethan Cole pulled his threadbare jacket tighter around his shoulders, the fabric doing little to keep out the October chill that seemed to seep into his very bones. His work boots splashed through puddles as he made his way down Madison Street, each step a reminder of the 12-hour shift he'd just finished at the warehouse. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a text from Mrs. Rodriguez, his neighbor who watched Emma after school. "She's asleep. Take your time coming home," he smiled despite his exhaustion. Emma, his 7-year-old daughter, was the only light in his increasingly dark world. 3 years since cancer took Sarah 3 years of trying to be both mother and father, 3 years of barely keeping his head above water. The warehouse job paid just enough to cover rent and Emma's needs, but nothing more. No savings, no safety net, no room for error. Every month was a delicate balance of bills and priorities, choosing between new shoes for Emma or fixing the heating in their cramped apartment. Tonight he'd worked an extra shift, time and a half pay, that would cover Emma's field trip next week. She'd been talking about the Science Museum for weeks, her eyes bright with excitement about seeing real dinosaur bones. He paused under the awning of a closed boutique, checking his wallet. $37 until Friday. Enough for groceries if he was careful, maybe even a small treat for Emma. She'd been asking about those chocolate chip cookies from the bakery on Fifth Avenue, the ones with sea salt on top that cost $4 each. An absurd price for a cookie, but the way her face lit up when she ate one made every penny worth it. The street was nearly empty at this hour, just past 11 on a Tuesday night. Most sensible people were home warm in their beds, not trudging through the rain after a backbreaking shift, moving boxes that seemed to get heavier every year. At 34, Ethan felt decades older, his body bearing the weight of loss and responsibility that had aged him beyond his years. A woman emerged from the Ritz-Carlton up ahead, her silhouette sharp against the golden light spilling from the hotel's entrance. Even from a distance, Ethan could tell she didn't belong on the street at this hour. Her coat alone probably cost more than he made in 6 months, a cream-colored cashmere that seemed to repel the rain. She moved with purpose, her heels clicking against the wet pavement in a rhythm that spoke of confidence and urgency. Ethan lowered his head and moved to the far side of the sidewalk. He'd learned long ago that people like her preferred not to see people like him. He was part of the invisible workforce that kept the city running, cleaning their offices, delivering their packages, building their towers, but never quite existing in their world. The woman was talking on her phone, her voice carrying in the quiet night. "No, Marcus, I don't care what the board thinks. The acquisition moves forward tomorrow or we lose our window." A pause. "I'm walking back to the office now. I need those contracts ready by morning." The office. At 11 at night. Ethan shook his head slightly. He'd never understand that kind of life, choosing work over everything else. Though perhaps he wasn't so different, choosing exhaustion over poverty, grinding himself down to give Emma a chance at something better. That's when he saw the shadows separate from the alley. The figure moved with the fluid grace of a predator, hood pulled, low hands buried in the pockets of a dark jacket. Every instinct Ethan had developed growing up on the South Side screamed danger. The man was following the woman, matching her pace, closing the distance with calculated steps. The woman remained oblivious, still absorbed in her call. "Tell them I'll be there in 15 minutes. We can conference call Tokyo from my office." 10 feet. The hooded figure was only 10 feet behind her now. Ethan's feet slowed. This wasn't his problem. He had Emma to think about. Getting involved in strangers' troubles was a luxury he couldn't afford, but his eyes caught something that made his blood run cold, a glimpse of metal as the man's hand shifted in his pocket. A knife. "Hey!" Ethan called out before he could stop himself. His voice cracked from exhaustion. "Hey, lady!" The woman turned, irritation flashing across her features. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe 30, with sharp cheekbones and eyes that held the kind of focus he'd only seen in emergency room surgeons and soldiers. "Excuse me," but the hooded man was already moving. The knife came out in one smooth motion, its blade catching the streetlight as it arced toward her. The woman's eyes widened, her phone clattering to the ground, but she was frozen, that split second of disbelief that costs lives. Ethan's body moved without conscious thought. 12 feet became 6, then 3, then nothing as he threw himself forward. His shoulder caught the woman in the ribs, sending her sprawling onto the wet sidewalk just as the knife whistled through the space where she'd been standing. The attacker snarled, adjusting his grip, and Ethan found himself between the blade and the woman. No time to think, no time to plan. The knife came again, faster this time, aimed at his chest. Ethan twisted, but not fast enough. Fire erupted along his left side as the blade found flesh slicing through his jacket and the soft tissue beneath. "Run!" he shouted at the woman, but she was already scrambling to her feet, her expensive coat torn and muddy. The attacker lunged again, and this time Ethan caught his wrist. They grappled in the rain, feet slipping on the slick pavement. The man was younger, stronger, fueled by desperation, or drugs, or both. But Ethan had something else, the image of Emma waking up tomorrow without a father, alone in a world that had already taken her mother. "Give me the fucking purse," the attacker hissed, his breath hot and sour. "She doesn't have one," Ethan gritted out, using his weight to pin the man's knife hand against a parked car. It was true. The woman had emerged from the hotel with nothing but her phone, which now lay in pieces on the sidewalk. The realization seemed to enrage the attacker further. He drove his knee into Ethan's injured side, and the world went white with pain. Ethan's grip loosened for just a moment, but it was enough. The attacker wrenched free, the knife swinging wild. Ethan raised his arm to block, feeling the blade bite deep into his forearm. Blood ran hot down his arm, mixing with the cold rain. "Stop!" The woman's voice cut through the night. She'd grabbed a piece of rebar from a nearby construction site, holding it like a baseball bat. "I've called the police." Sirens wailed in the distance. Whether from her call or coincidence, Ethan didn't know. The attacker's head snapped toward the sound, calculating. Then he ran, disappearing into the maze of alleys that crisscrossed this part of the city. Ethan's knees hit the pavement hard. The adrenaline was fading, leaving only pain and a strange coldness spreading from his injuries. His jacket was soaked with blood, the dark fabric hiding the extent of the damage. "Oh God, oh God!" The woman was beside him suddenly, her hands pressing against his side. "Don't move. Help is coming." "Are you—" Ethan had to swallow, his mouth suddenly dry. "Are you hurt?" She stared at him as if he'd spoken in a foreign language. "Am I hurt?" "You're bleeding. You're bleeding everywhere." "Good," he mumbled. "That's good. You're not hurt." Her hands were surprisingly steady as she stripped off her coat, pressing the expensive fabric against his wounds. "What's your name?" "Ethan. Ethan Cole." "Ethan, you're going to be fine. Stay with me." Her voice had changed, taking on a tone of command that suggested she was used to being obeyed. "Look at me. Focus on my voice." He tried to focus, but her face kept swimming in and out of clarity. "I have a daughter," he said, panic suddenly spiking through the pain. "Emma. She's 7. If something happens—" "Nothing's going to happen." The woman's hand found his, squeezing tight. "You're going to be fine. You're going to see Emma tomorrow." The sirens were closer now. Red and blue lights painted the wet streets in alternating colors. Ethan heard voices, felt hands lifting him, moving him. The woman never let go of his hand. "Ma'am, we need you to step back." "I'm going with him." "Ma'am." "I said I'm going with him." That tone again, the one that brooked no argument. The ambulance ride was a blur of pain and motion. Ethan caught fragments, the woman arguing with someone on a new phone that had appeared from somewhere, demanding the best surgical team, threatening consequences if anything went wrong. He wanted to tell her it was okay, that he'd had worse, but forming words seemed impossibly difficult. "Claire," she was saying into the phone. "This is Claire Donovan. I need you to clear Trauma Bay 1 at Northwestern Memorial, now." The name meant nothing to Ethan in his current state, but he saw the EMT's eyes widen, saw him exchange glances with his partner. Ms. Donovan, we're already en route to Northwestern. He's stable. He saved my life, she said quietly, and something in her voice made everyone in the ambulance go still. He stepped in front of a knife for a complete stranger, so you're going to give him the same care you'd give me. Better. Understood. The EMT nodded quickly. Yes, ma'am. Ethan wanted to protest to say he didn't need special treatment, that his insurance probably wouldn't cover any of this. But darkness was creeping in from the edges of his vision, and Emma's face was all he could see. Her gap-toothed smile, the way she still reached for his hand when they crossed the street. How she insisted on reading him bedtime stories instead of the other way around. Emma, he whispered. Claire leaned close. Your daughter. Where is she? Mrs. Rodriguez, apartment 4B, Wellington Arms on Ashland. I'll make sure she's taken care of, I promise. The last thing Ethan remembered was the woman's face above him, her expression fierce with a determination he didn't understand. Then the darkness claimed him completely. He woke to the sound of machines beeping and the antiseptic smell that could only mean hospital. His side throbbed with a deep, insistent pain that morphine couldn't quite touch. His left arm was wrapped in bandages, immobilized against his chest. Dad! His heart nearly stopped. Emma was there, curled up in a chair beside his bed, her favorite stuffed elephant clutched in her arms. Mrs. Rodriguez sat beside her, but it was the other woman in the room that made Ethan's breath catch. Claire Donovan stood by the window speaking quietly into her phone. In the daylight, without rain and blood and chaos, he could see her clearly. She was the kind of beautiful that came from good genetics and better maintenance, sharp features softened by expensive makeup, blonde hair that fell in perfect waves despite what must have been a sleepless night. Her clothes were different, but no less expensive. A black suit that probably cost more than his car. He's awake, Emma announced, and suddenly all three women were moving toward him. Mija, be careful, Mrs. Rodriguez warned as Emma scrambled onto the bed. It's okay, Ethan said, his voice rough. He wrapped his good arm around his daughter, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. Hey, baby girl. You got hurt, Emma said accusingly. Mrs. Rodriguez said you were a hero, but heroes aren't supposed to get hurt. Sometimes they do, Claire said softly. She'd ended her call and moved closer to the bed. Sometimes being a hero means getting hurt so someone else doesn't. Emma studied her with the unfiltered curiosity of childhood. Are you the lady my dad saved? I am. Are you rich? Emma. Ethan groaned, but Claire laughed a genuine sound that transformed her face. Yes, I am. Good, Emma said decisively. Then you can pay for my dad's hospital. We don't have very good insurance. The innocence of the statement, the matter-of-fact way his 7-year-old had already learned to worry about medical bills, made Ethan's chest tight with something that had nothing to do with his injuries. Emma, that's not already taken care of, Claire interrupted. Everything, and I've arranged for a private room as soon as one becomes available. Ethan stared at her. You can't. I can, and I have. Her tone was the same one she'd used with the EMTs. Mr. Cole, Ethan, you saved my life. The least I can do is ensure you receive proper medical care. I don't need charity. It's not charity, it's gratitude. She paused, and something shifted in her expression. Do you know who I am? Ethan shook his head. The name was vaguely familiar, but he couldn't place it. Mom, I'll be back in a bit, Claire said into her phone. Then to Ethan, I'm the CEO of Donovan Industries. We're a tech company primarily focused on renewable energy solutions. The name clicked. Donovan Industries. He'd seen their logo on buildings on the news. They'd just announced some breakthrough in solar panel efficiency that had made headlines for weeks. The billboard lady, Emma exclaimed. You're on that big billboard by my school. Claire smiled. That's right. Ethan felt suddenly out of his depth. He'd saved a billionaire, the kind of person whose time was literally worth more per minute than he made in a day. I didn't know. Would it have mattered? Claire asked. He thought about that moment when he'd seen the knife, seen her frozen in fear. No. Then we understand each other. She turned to Mrs. Rodriguez. Thank you for bringing Emma. I've arranged for a car to take you both home whenever you're ready. And Mrs. Rodriguez, I'd like to compensate you for your time. No, no. The older woman waved her hands. Emma is like my granddaughter. I don't need payment to care for family. Claire nodded slowly, but Ethan saw her file the information away. He'd learn later that Mrs. Rodriguez's medical bills mysteriously disappeared, that her grandson's college tuition was suddenly covered by an anonymous scholarship. I should go, Claire said. You need rest. But Ethan, she pulled out a business card, expensive stock with raised lettering. When you're discharged, call me, please. Why? She was quiet for a moment, looking out the window at the city sprawling below. I've been in boardrooms with men who would sell their souls for a fraction of my wealth. I've negotiated with people who would step on anyone to climb higher. But last night, a complete stranger was willing to die to protect me. Not because of who I am or what I could do for them, but simply because it was the right thing to do. She turned back to him. That's rare, Mr. Cole. Rarer than you might think. After she left, Ethan held Emma close, listening to her chatter about school, about Mrs. Rodriguez teaching her to make empanadas, about anything, except the fact that her father was lying in a hospital bed. But his mind kept drifting to Claire Donovan, to the way she'd held his hand in the ambulance, to the fierce protectiveness in her voice when she'd demanded he receive the best care. He looked at the business card she'd left behind. Claire Donovan, CEO. Her direct line, not a secretary or assistant. He tucked it into the drawer beside his bed, certain he'd never use it. They were from different worlds, brought together by violence and coincidence. Once he healed, they'd go their separate ways, her to her boardrooms and billboards, him to his warehouse and his daughter. But life, Ethan would learn, rarely followed the expected path. 3 days later, he was moved to a private room that looked more like a luxury hotel suite than a hospital. Fresh flowers appeared daily, not the showy arrangements he'd expected, but simple daisies and sunflowers that made Emma smile. His meals came from the hospital's executive kitchen, and a tablet appeared on his bedside table loaded with games and educational apps for Emma. The lady sent them, Emma informed him, already deep into a coding game that would have cost $50 in the App Store. She called to ask what I liked. She called you Uh-huh. She's nice. She asked about school and said I could visit her office sometime to see the robots they're building. Ethan didn't know what to make of it. In his experience, rich people didn't maintain interest in their charity cases. They wrote checks and moved on, their consciences clear. But Claire seemed different, or maybe that was just wishful thinking from a man who'd been alone too long. On the 5th day, Dr. Patterson came in with his discharge papers. You're healing remarkably well, she said. The wound to your side missed anything vital, and your arm should regain full mobility with physical therapy. When can I go back to work? The doctor frowned. Mr. Cole, you need at least 3 weeks of recovery, longer if your job involves physical labor. 3 weeks. 3 weeks without pay meant no rent, no food, no... Your employer has been notified, the doctor continued. Ms. Donovan's people handled everything. You'll receive full pay during your recovery, and your position will be waiting when you're cleared to return. Ethan stared at her. That's not possible. The warehouse doesn't... Apparently, Donovan Industries has a significant contract with your employer. Ms. Donovan made some calls. Made some calls? As if it were that simple. As if she hadn't just rearranged his entire world with a phone call. That evening, as Emma dozed in the chair beside him, Ethan pulled out Claire's card. He stared at it for a long time before finally dialing. She answered on the second ring. Ethan, how are you feeling? Like you've done too much, he said without preamble. I've done what's necessary. The flowers, the tablet, making sure I don't lose my job. Is the bare minimum for someone who saved my life. I didn't do it for a reward. I know. Her voice softened. That's exactly why you deserve one. There was a pause, the kind that felt weighted with things unsaid. Can I ask you something? Ethan said. Of course. Why were you walking alone at night? Someone like you must have driver's security. Claire was quiet for so long, he thought she might not answer. Sometimes, she finally said, I need to remember what it feels like to be human, to walk down a street without handlers and schedules and people watching my every move. It was stupid, I know. Not stupid, Ethan said. Human. Most people in my position forget how to be that. Maybe you haven't been around the right people. She laughed, but it sounded sad. Mr. Cole, the people I'm around would have watched me get stabbed and calculated how it would affect stock prices. That's terrifying. That's business. Another pause. I should let you rest. Claire, Miss Donovan. Claire is fine. Claire, when I get out of here, everything goes back to normal, right? You've paid whatever debt you think you owe, and we go our separate ways. This time, the silence stretched longer. Is that what you want? Ethan looked at Emma sleeping peacefully, despite the uncomfortable hospital chair. He thought about their small apartment, about the life they'd built from the ashes of loss. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. It's what makes sense, he said. That wasn't what I asked. But she didn't wait for an answer, ending the call with a soft goodbye that left Ethan staring at his phone, wondering why his chest felt hollow in a way that had nothing to do with his injuries. The next morning brought chaos. Ethan woke to find 3 men in expensive suits standing in his room looking deeply uncomfortable. Mr. Cole, the tallest one said, I'm Marcus Webb, Ms. Donovan's chief of staff. We have a situation. Ethan pushed himself up, wincing at the pull on his stitches. What kind of situation? Webb handed him a tablet. The screen showed a news article with the headline, Mysterious Hero Saves Tech CEO from Violent Attack. The article was accompanied by a grainy security camera photo that showed Ethan mid-lunge pushing Claire out of the knife's path. His face wasn't clearly visible, but it was only a matter of time. The press has gotten wind of the incident, Webb explained. They're trying to identify you. Ms. Donovan has managed to keep them at bay so far, but they're persistent, Claire said from the doorway. She looked tired, stress etched in the lines around her eyes. I'm sorry, Ethan. I tried to keep you out of this. It's not your fault. It is, actually. My life comes with scrutiny. Anyone who enters it, even briefly, becomes subject to that same scrutiny. Emma stirred in her chair, blinking awake. Ms. Claire... Claire's expression softened instantly. Hello, Emma. I brought you something. She produced a book from her bag, not just any book, but a first edition of Emma's favorite series signed by the author. Emma's eyes went wide. How did you know? Your dad mentioned you were reading it the other night. Ethan didn't remember mentioning that, but maybe he had. The pain medication made everything fuzzy around the edges. Ms. Donovan, Webb interrupted, we need to discuss the press strategy. Later, Marcus. But later. Her tone left no room for argument. Webb and the other suits filed out clearly unhappy but obedient. Claire took the chair beside Ethan's bed while Emma dove into her new book. I'm going to have to make a statement, she said quietly. The board is insisting. They're worried about security concerns, liability issues. Tell them the truth. Some random guy helped you out. End of story. Except it's not the end, is it? She wasn't looking at him, her attention seemingly fixed on the window. You're not random, not anymore. What do you mean? She turned to face him then, and there was something in her expression he couldn't read. I mean that in 5 days you've shown me more genuine human kindness than I've experienced in 5 years. Emma calls me just to tell me about her day. Your neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez invited me for Sunday dinner. Do you have any idea how long it's been since someone invited me to dinner without wanting something? We don't want anything either. Exactly. She stood abruptly. I should go. The lawyers are waiting. She was at the door when Ethan spoke. Claire, make your statement. Tell them whatever you need to tell them. But afterward, when the circus dies down, I'd like to buy you a cup of coffee. She turned back, surprise evident on her face. You want to buy me coffee? Well, I can't afford dinner, he said with a wry smile. But yeah, coffee. Somewhere normal where nobody knows who you are, where you can just be human for an hour. For a moment, she looked vulnerable in a way that had nothing to do with knives or dark streets. I'd like that, she said softly. I'd like that very much. After she left, Emma looked up from her book. Dad? Do you like Ms. Claire? She's nice, baby. That's not what I asked. 7 years old and already too perceptive for her own good. It's complicated, Em. Grown-ups always say that when they don't want to admit something. When did you get so smart? Tuesday, Emma said seriously, then giggled at his expression. That afternoon, Ethan watched Claire on the news giving a carefully crafted statement about the attack. She thanked her heroic protector, but didn't reveal his name, citing privacy concerns. She looked every inch the powerful CEO, polished professional, untouchable. Nothing like the woman who'd held his hand in the ambulance or laughed at Emma's jokes. The story would have ended there, a brief intersection of two very different lives, if not for what happened next. Ethan was filling out discharge paperwork when his phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Cole, this is Detective Patricia Morse with the Chicago PD. We've arrested the man who attacked you and Ms. Donovan. That's good news. Yes and no. He's talking Mr. Cole. Claims someone paid him to attack Ms. Donovan specifically. This wasn't a random mugging. Ethan's blood went cold. Someone tried to have her killed. That's what we're investigating. We'll need you to come in for additional questioning. And Mr. Cole, you might want to let Ms. Donovan know. She could still be in danger. Ethan hung up and immediately dialed Claire's number. It went to voicemail. He tried again. Nothing. Mrs. Rodriguez, he called to his neighbor who was packing up Emma's things. I need you to watch Emma for a little longer. Ethan, you're in no condition. But he was already pulling on his jacket, ignoring the screaming protest from his injuries. He knew where Claire's office was. Everyone in Chicago did. The Donovan Tower was a gleaming monument to sustainable architecture, 40 stories of solar panels and vertical gardens. He caught a taxi bleeding through his bandages by the time he reached the tower. Security tried to stop him at the entrance. I need to see Claire Donovan. Now. Sir, you need an appointment. Call her. Tell her Ethan Cole is here, and it's about the attack. The guard looked skeptical, but made the call. His expression changed rapidly. Yes, ma'am. Right away. He turned to Ethan. Express elevator to the 40th floor. She's waiting. The elevator ride seemed endless. Ethan pressed his hand to his side, feeling wetness seep through. He'd definitely torn something, but it didn't matter. The detective's words echoed in his head. Someone paid him. The elevator opened directly into Claire's office, a massive space with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. Claire was there along with Webb and several other people in suits. Ethan, what are you... She stopped seeing the blood on his shirt. Oh my God, you're bleeding. Someone paid him, Ethan said without preamble. The attacker. The police just called. Someone paid him to kill you. The room went very quiet. That's impossible, Webb said. Who would... Get out, Claire said quietly. Ms. Donovan. Everyone out. Now. They filed out reluctantly, leaving Claire and Ethan alone in the vast office. She moved toward him, hands reaching for his injury, but he caught her wrist gently. Who wants you dead, Claire? She laughed, but it was bitter. Take your pick. Competitors, board members who think I'm too young, too female, too aggressive. My ex-husband, who's still furious about the divorce settlement. The oil companies were putting out of business with our solar tech. This is your life, people wanting you dead. This is success. She pulled free of his grip, walking to the window. My father built this company from nothing. When he died 5 years ago, everyone expected it to fail. A 25-year-old girl couldn't possibly run a billion-dollar corporation. But I did. I grew it. I made it matter. And yes, I made enemies. Claire, I have security, Ethan, a whole team, but I sent them away that night because I wanted to walk, just walk, like a normal person. Her reflection in the window looked haunted. I nearly got you killed because I wanted to pretend I was normal. Ethan moved to stand beside her, his side screaming in protest. You didn't get me hurt. The man with the knife did that. Because of who I am. No, because of who he is. He turned her to face him. Claire, you can't blame yourself for other people's evil. She looked up at him, and for a moment the mask slipped completely. She wasn't a CEO or a billionaire. She was just a woman who'd been afraid who was still afraid. I haven't felt safe in 5 years, she whispered. Not since my father died and I inherited all of this. There's always someone watching, waiting, calculating, and then you, a complete stranger, threw yourself between me and danger without thinking twice. Do you understand how impossible that is in my world? It's not impossible, it's human. Not where I come from. Ethan swayed slightly, the blood loss finally catching up. Claire caught him surprisingly strong for someone so polished. You need a hospital. I need to know you're safe. I have the best security money can buy. They weren't there that night. No, she agreed. You were. She helped him to the leather couch that probably cost more than his annual salary. As she pressed a towel from her private bathroom against his reopened wound, Ethan caught her hand. Hire me. She blinked. What? You need security you can trust, someone who cares more about your safety than your money. Hire me. Ethan, you're not a bodyguard. You work in a warehouse. I grew up on the South Side. I've been in more fights than I can count. I know how to spot trouble, and more importantly, I give a damn whether you live or die. He squeezed her hand. Plus, Emma likes you. She's an excellent judge of character. Claire stared at him. You're serious. Dead serious. Look, you need someone you can trust. I need a job that pays enough to give Emma a better life. Maybe we can help each other. This is insane. So was walking alone at night, but you did that. She was quiet for a long moment, studying his face, as if trying to solve a complex equation. The board would never approve it. So don't tell them. Personal security off the books. You'd have to be with me constantly, travel late nights, boring social events. Emma loves Mrs. Rodriguez. She'd be thrilled to spend more time with her. I can't let you put yourself in danger for me again. You're not letting me. I'm choosing to. Why? The question seemed torn from her. Why would you choose this? Ethan thought about lying about giving her some noble answer about duty or gratitude, but she deserved the truth. Because in 5 days you've made me feel more alive than I have in 3 years. Because you look at me like I'm a person, not just another invisible worker. Because when you laugh at Emma's jokes, it's real. And because maybe, just maybe, we can be good for each other. The office was silent except for the distant hum of the city 40 floors below. Claire's hand was still in his, and neither of them seemed inclined to let go. All right, she said finally. We'll try it. 3 months probationary period. If it doesn't work, it will work. You don't know that. I knew to step in front of that knife. Sometimes you just know things. She smiled, then soft and genuine. My head of security is going to have a heart attack. He'll get over it. The board will think I've lost my mind. Have you? Possibly. She stood reaching for her phone. I'm calling an ambulance, and then I'm calling my lawyers to draw up a contract, and then... She paused, looking back at him. Then we're going to find out who tried to kill me. As the paramedics arrived and fussed over his reopened wounds, Ethan watched Claire transform back into the CEO, sharp-focused, commanding. But every so often, her eyes would find his, and he'd see the woman underneath, the one who walked alone in the rain, the one who'd held his hand in the ambulance. He thought about the strange turns life could take. A week ago, he'd been nobody special, just another single father grinding through each day. Now he was about to become the personal bodyguard to one of the most powerful women in Chicago. It should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like the first right thing to happen since Sarah died. His phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Dad, are you coming home? Mrs. Rodriguez is teaching me to make tamales, but I want to show you my new book. He smiled, texting back, soon, baby. Things are about to change, but I'll be home soon. He had no idea how much of an understatement that would prove to be. The contract arrived the next morning, delivered by a courier who looked bewildered to be standing in the hallway of the Wellington Arms apartment building. Ethan signed for it while balancing on crutches, his side still tender from yesterday's impromptu trip to Claire's office. Fancy envelope, Mrs. Rodriguez observed from her doorway, Emma peeking out beside her. Your new boss doesn't do things halfway. Ethan carried the package inside, settling at their small kitchen table. The contract was 20 pages of dense legal text, but the basics were clear. Personal security consultant. The salary made him blink twice more than triple what he made at the warehouse, with full benefits of vehicle allowance and an education fund for Emma. Dad, why are you crying? Emma climbed onto his lap, careful of his injuries. I'm not crying, baby. Just happy. Happy tears are okay. she said sagely. Mom used to have those when she watched us together. The casual mention of Sarah still had the power to steal his breath. Emma rarely talked about her mother anymore, as if preserving those memories required a kind of silence. Ethan pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. His phone rang. Claire. Did you receive the contract? It's too much, Claire. It's industry standard for personal security. I'm not industry standard. I'm a warehouse worker with a hero complex, remember? You're the man who saved my life. Her voice softened. And apparently you're also the man who's going to keep saving it. The detective called me this morning. They have a lead on who hired the attacker. Ethan straightened. Who? They wouldn't say over the phone. They want us both to come in this afternoon. Can you make it? I'll be there. I'll send a car. Claire, I can take the bus. You absolutely cannot take the bus. You have stitches in your side and your arm is in a sling. The car will be there in an hour. She hung up before he could protest. Emma giggled at his expression. She's bossy, his daughter observed. She's used to getting her way. Is that bad? Ethan thought about it. Not always. Sometimes people need someone who knows what they want. The car that arrived wasn't a standard town car, but an armored SUV with tinted windows. The driver, a serious-looking man named James, helped Ethan into the back seat with professional courtesy. Ms. Donovan asked me to ensure your comfort, sir. There's water and pain medication in the compartment to your left. The ride to the police station was surreal. Ethan had passed these streets thousands of times on the bus, but from inside the climate-controlled, whisper-quiet interior of the SUV, the city looked different. Safer, maybe. Or just more distant. Claire was already at the station, flanked by lawyers. She looked immaculate in a navy suit, but Ethan noticed the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers drummed against her thigh. You made it, she said, and something in her expression relaxed slightly. Detective Morse was a middle-aged black woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She led them to an interview room that smelled of burnt coffee and industrial disinfectant. Thank you both for coming. Mr. Cole, how are your injuries? Healing. Good. Ms. Donovan, what I'm about to share is sensitive. Your lawyers can wait outside, Claire finished. This is my life we're discussing. The lawyers protested, but Claire's look silenced them. They filed out reluctantly, leaving just the three of them. Detective Morse opened a file. The man who attacked you is Thomas Brennan, small-time criminal, mostly theft and drug charges. But here's where it gets interesting. 3 days before the attack, $50,000 was deposited into his girlfriend's account. $50,000? Ethan whistled low. That's serious money for a street mugging. Exactly. We traced the payment through several shell companies, but eventually we found the source. She pulled out a photograph. Recognize him. Claire went very still. Richard. Richard Hawthorne, Detective Morse confirmed. Your ex-husband. Ethan looked at the photo. The man was handsome in that practiced way that came from expensive grooming and a personal trainer. Perfect teeth, perfect hair, perfectly empty eyes. He wouldn't, Claire said, but her voice lacked conviction. The divorce was finalized 2 years ago. He got his settlement. A settlement that prevented him from accessing your father's technology patents, the detective noted. Patents now worth approximately $2 billion thanks to your renewable energy breakthrough. Claire's hand found the edge of the table, gripping it until her knuckles went white. He knew about the breakthrough. He was there for the early research before we separated. He said the technology would never work, that I was wasting company resources on a pipe dream. And now that pipe dream is revolutionizing the energy sector, Detective Morse said. We've been investigating Mr. Hawthorne's finances. He's in debt significantly. Bad investments, gambling, maintaining a lifestyle he can no longer afford. Killing you would trigger a clause in your father's will, wouldn't it? Claire nodded slowly. If I die without children, the company passes to its board of directors for sale or dissolution. Richard has connections on that board. He could potentially buy back in at a fraction of the value. We're bringing him in for questioning this afternoon. But Ms. Donovan, I need to be clear about something. Even if we can prove he hired Brennan, he might have other plans in motion. You need to be extremely careful. Ethan spoke for the first time since the revelation. What kind of man tries to kill his ex-wife for money? The kind who never loved her in the first place, Claire said quietly. I was an acquisition for Richard, the CEO's daughter, the heir to an empire. When my father died and left everything to me instead of to us, jointly, Richard showed his true colors. Detective Morse closed the file. We'll have officers stationed at your residence and office, but I have private security, Claire said, glancing at Ethan. Recently hired. The detective followed her gaze, taking in Ethan's working-class clothes and current injuries with obvious skepticism. No offense, Mr. Cole, but none taken. I know how it looks. What matters is that I trust him, Claire said firmly. More than I've trusted anyone in a very long time. They left the station together, Claire dismissing her lawyers with a wave. In the SUV, she finally allowed herself to crumble slightly, her perfect posture sagging against the leather seats. 2 years, she said. 2 years since the divorce, and he still wants to destroy me. Hey. Ethan reached across with his good arm, taking her hand. He's not going to. We won't let him. She looked at their joined hands with something like wonder. You just found out that staying close to me could get you killed, and you're still here. Where else would I be? Literally anywhere safer. Yeah, well, safe is overrated. He squeezed her hand gently. Besides, Emma would never forgive me if I let something happen to you. You're apparently the coolest adult she knows. That drew a small smile. She's a remarkable little girl. She gets it from her mother. Tell me about her, Sarah. Ethan rarely talked about Sarah with anyone except Emma, but something about Claire's genuine interest, the way she turned toward him in the dim interior of the car, made the words come easier. We met in high school. She was this bright, brilliant thing, way too good for a kid from my neighborhood, but she saw something in me, pushed me to be better. We got married young, had Emma young. Sarah was diagnosed with cancer when Emma was 4. I'm sorry. The medical bills destroyed us financially. I worked 3 jobs trying to keep up, but Sarah's focus was always on Emma. Making memories, she called it. Recording videos for birthdays she wouldn't see, writing letters for Emma to open on important days. She fought for 2 years, but the cancer was aggressive. How do you do it? Keep going after losing someone like that. You wake up one day and realize your kid needs breakfast, then lunch, then dinner. And somewhere in between making peanut butter sandwiches and checking homework, life keeps happening. You don't move on exactly, you just move forward. Claire was quiet for a moment. Richard and I never had children. He said they'd interfere with our trajectory. I think now he just didn't want the competition for my attention. His loss. I wanted them, she admitted. I wanted the chaos and the mess and the beauty of it. But after the divorce, after taking over the company, there was never time, never the right person. The SUV pulled up to Claire's building. She hadn't let go of his hand. Come up, she said. I want to show you something. Her penthouse was exactly what Ethan expected and nothing like it at all. Yes, there was the stunning view, the expensive furniture, the art that probably cost more than most people's houses. But there were also personal touches, a stuffed bear on the pristine couch, a child's drawing framed on the wall. My godson, Claire explained, following his gaze. My college roommate's kid. They live in Portland now, but we video chat every week. She led him to a home office that was more lived in than the rest of the space. Papers covered every surface, whiteboards filled with equations lined the walls, and a half-eaten sandwich sat forgotten on a stack of reports. This is where the magic happens, she said with a self-deprecating smile, or where I hide when the world gets too loud. It's perfect, Ethan said, meaning it. This was Claire without the armor, without the CEO facade. She pulled out a thick folder. If you're going to protect me, you need to know what you're protecting me from. Not just Richard, but all of it. The folder contained threats, dozens of them. Email printouts, letters, photos taken from a distance. Some were clearly cranks, but others were sophisticated, specific. Jesus, Claire, why haven't you gone to the police with these? I have with some of them. But you have to understand this is normal for someone in my position. The price of success, my father used to say. This isn't normal. This is insane. This is my life. She moved to the window looking out at the city below. Every person down there either wants something from me or wants me gone. Except you. And Emma. And Emma, she agreed with a small smile. Your daughter has excellent taste in friends. Ethan joined her at the window, standing close enough that their shoulders touched. So what's the plan? We can't just wait for Richard to make another move. We don't wait. Tomorrow I have a board meeting. Half those vultures would love to see me fail. Richard has allies there, people who think the company should have gone to him when my father died. I need to show them I'm untouchable, that what happened was an anomaly. And how do we do that? By showing up, by refusing to hide, by being so visible that any move against me becomes impossible to ignore. She turned to face him. But I need you with me, not just as security, but as support. Claire, I don't exactly fit in with the boardroom crowd. You fit with me. That's all that matters. The weight of her trust was almost overwhelming. This woman who had every reason to trust no one was putting her faith in him. Okay, he said, but we do this my way. I need to know your schedule, your routines, everyone who has access to you. And we're going to need to make some changes. What kind of changes? For starters, no more walking alone. Ever. I don't care if it's just to the corner store or across your office. Someone is always with you. That's going to be non-negotiable. Also, we're varying your routes. Different cars, different times, unpredictable patterns. Richard knew you'd be at that hotel, knew you'd walk. Someone's feeding him information. Claire paled. You think I have a mole? I think you have a company worth billions and an ex-husband desperate enough to kill for it. We assume everyone's compromised until proven otherwise. Even Marcus. He's been with me since the beginning. Especially the ones who've been there longest. They're the ones who know you best. She sank into her desk chair, suddenly looking exhausted. This is my father's company. These people are like family. Family can betray you too. Speaking from experience, my uncle sold my location to a gang I testified against for $50 and a case of beer. Blood doesn't mean loyalty. How do you trust anyone after something like that? You don't. You choose. Every day you choose who deserves your faith, and sometimes you get it wrong, but that doesn't mean you stop choosing. His phone buzzed. Emma texting from Mrs. Rodriguez's phone. Dad, when are you coming home? Mrs. R made arroz con leche, but I want to eat it with you. Claire read the message over his shoulder. Go, be with your daughter. Come with me. She blinked in surprise. What? Come have dinner with us. Mrs. Rodriguez always makes too much food, and Emma would love it. Plus, it's safer than you being here alone. Ethan, I can't just show up at your neighbor's apartment. Why not? Because people like me don't. Because you're human and you need to eat dinner. Come on, Claire. You said you wanted to be normal sometimes. This is normal. Dinner with friends. Emma chattering your ear off, Mrs. Rodriguez trying to feed you until you burst. She looked tempted but uncertain. I wouldn't want to impose. The only imposition would be if you said no and broke Emma's heart. She's been asking when you're visiting again. That decided it. Claire grabbed a jacket, still designer, but at least more casual than her suit, and followed him to the elevator. Should I bring something wine dessert? Just yourself. That's enough. The ride to his neighborhood was a journey between worlds. The gleaming towers gave way to older buildings, designer boutiques replaced by corner bodegas, luxury cars by beaten-up sedans. Claire watched it all with curious eyes, not fearful or judgmental, just interested. You grew up here. Few blocks over, rougher area but same idea. People looking out for each other, raising kids together, making something from nothing. The Wellington Arms looked shabbier than usual with Claire beside him, but she didn't seem to notice. She was too busy watching the kids playing in the courtyard, the women gossiping on the steps, the men working on a car in the parking lot. It's alive, she said softly. My building is beautiful, but it's not alive like this. Mrs. Rodriguez opened her door before they could knock, Emma bouncing beside her. Miss Claire, Dad said you might come. I saved you a seat and everything. The apartment was small but warm, filled with the smell of sofrito and something sweet baking in the oven. Claire fit into the chaos surprisingly well, helping Emma set the table while listening to Mrs. Rodriguez's story about her grandson's latest soccer game. Over dinner, arroz con pollo beans, sweet plantains, and enough food for twice their number. Ethan watched Claire transform. The tension bled from her shoulders, her laugh came easier, and she even attempted Spanish when Mrs. Rodriguez taught her phrases. Tu español es muy bueno, Mrs. Rodriguez said encouragingly, though Claire's pronunciation was atrocious. You're being very kind, Claire replied. I sound like a tourist guidebook. But you try, that's what matters. Emma regaled them with school stories, showing Claire her latest art project, a painting of a family that now included a blonde figure she insisted wasn't anyone in particular but looked suspiciously like Claire. This is nice, the little girl announced, like a real family dinner. The words hung in the air for a moment, heavy with implication. Ethan started to redirect the conversation, but Claire spoke first. It is nice, the best dinner I've had in years. It's even better than fancy restaurants. Especially better than fancy restaurants? They never have dessert as good as Mrs. Rodriguez's flan. Mrs. Rodriguez beamed immediately, cutting Claire an extra-large piece. As the evening wound down, Ethan walked Claire to the SUV where James waited patiently. Thank you, she said, for this, for showing me this. This life, real life, not the performance I've been living, but actual, messy, beautiful life. It's here whenever you want it. She looked back at the building where Emma waved from Mrs. Rodriguez's window. I think I might want it a lot. Good, because Emma's already planning next week's dinner. Fair warning, she wants to teach you to play her favorite board game. It involves a lot of questionable rules she makes up as she goes. Sounds perfect. Claire hesitated, then stepped closer. Ethan, what are we doing? Right now we're saying goodnight. You know what I mean. He did. The space between them had been shrinking all day, the professional boundaries blurring into something neither of them had named yet. We're figuring it out as we go, he said. Is that okay? I'm used to 5-year plans and strategic projections. How's that working out for you? Well, my ex-husband is trying to kill me, so not great. Then maybe it's time to try something different. She stood on her toes and kissed his cheek, her lips warm against his skin. Good night, Ethan. Tomorrow's going to be interesting. As the SUV pulled away, Ethan touched the spot where she'd kissed him, wondering how his life had changed so completely in just a week. From warehouse worker to bodyguard, from single father, barely making it to someone who might actually be able to give Emma the life she deserved. But more than that, from alone to whatever this was with Claire. Not alone, certainly. Not anymore. His phone buzzed. Claire. Made it home safe. Thank you again for tonight. For everything. He texted back, all part of the job. Her response was immediate. Liar. This stopped being about the job the moment you held my hand in that ambulance. She wasn't wrong, but tomorrow would bring enough complications, board meetings, Richard's arrest, the media circus that would inevitably follow. Tonight, Ethan climbed the stairs to his apartment where Emma waited in her pajamas for her bedtime story and let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, they were all going to be okay. The next morning arrived too soon and not soon enough. Ethan stood in front of his closet, realizing he owned nothing appropriate for a corporate board meeting. His best option was a black suit he'd worn to Sarah's funeral, now 3 years out of style and showing its age. A knock at the door interrupted his deliberation. A delivery man stood outside with a garment bag. Ethan Cole. Yeah, delivery from Ms. Donovan. Inside was a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, crisp white shirt, and a subtle blue tie that probably cost more than his monthly rent. A note in Claire's handwriting read, "Don't argue. You need to look the part. The armor matters in this battlefield. See." The suit fit perfectly, of course. Claire had probably had James take his measurements somehow, or maybe she just had that uncanny ability wealthy people seem to possess to know things without asking. Emma's eyes widened when he emerged from his bedroom. Dad, you look like James Bond. I feel like an imposter. Ms. Claire says everyone feels like that sometimes. She told me she feels like she's pretending to be a grown-up in her dad's office. When had Claire told her that Ethan was continually surprised by the relationship developing between his daughter and the CEO conducted through phone calls and texts he only partially knew about? The SUV arrived at 8 sharp. Claire was already inside, dressed in a power suit that made yesterday's outfit look casual. But her fingers were tapping that nervous rhythm against her thigh again. "You clean up nice," she said, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "What's wrong?" "Richard's lawyers got him released on bail last night. $1 million, but he paid it immediately." "How you said he was in debt?" "That's what worries me. Someone's backing him. Someone with deep pockets who wants me gone as much as he does." The boardroom was on the 38th floor, a monument to corporate power with its long mahogany table and wall of windows. 12 board members were already assembled, most of them men old enough to be Claire's father, all wearing expressions of barely concealed condescension. "Gentlemen," Claire said, taking her place at the head of the table. "And Margaret," she added, nodding to the lone woman. "Thank you for accommodating this emergency meeting." "Is it true?" demanded a heavy-set man with a red face. "About the attack, about Richard. It's true that I was attacked. It's true that Richard has been arrested in connection with that attack. Everything else is speculation and gossip, which I trust this board is above." "This is exactly what we warned about," another man interjected. "A young woman running a company of this magnitude, it invites nothing," Claire cut him off. "Unless you're suggesting that my gender somehow forced Richard to allegedly hire someone to kill me." "Of course not," the man backpedaled. "But the optics. The optics are that Donovan Industries continues to outperform every projection despite attempts on my life. Our solar technology is 3 years ahead of any competitor. Our stock has risen 40% in the last quarter alone. If that's the result of a young woman's leadership, then perhaps more companies should try it." Ethan stood by the door trying to be invisible while keeping his eyes on everyone. One board member in particular caught his attention, a younger man, maybe 40, who kept checking his phone and glancing at the door. "The real question," Claire continued, "is whether this board stands behind its CEO or whether it allows personal prejudices and possibly criminal conspiracies to undermine the company my father built." "That's a strong accusation," Margaret said carefully. "Are you suggesting someone on this board is involved?" "I'm suggesting that Richard didn't act alone. He had information about my schedule that only someone with inside access could provide. So yes, I'm suggesting we have a traitor in this room." The room erupted in indignant protests. The younger man Ethan had been watching stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. I have a meeting." "Sit down, David," Claire said coldly. "No one leaves until we're finished." David Morse. Ethan recognized the name from Claire's files. A recent addition to the board, with ties to several competing energy companies, remained standing. "You can't keep us here." "Actually, I can. Security has sealed the floor. We're going to have a very honest conversation about loyalty, about the future of this company, and about who might benefit from my death." Ethan moved subtly to block the door. David's hand went to his pocket and Ethan tensed, but the man only pulled out his phone. "This is imprisonment. I'm calling my lawyer." "Please do," Claire said. "I'm sure they'll be fascinated to hear about the $50,000 transferred from your offshore account to Richard Hawthorne's lawyer 2 days ago." The room went silent. David's face drained of color. "I don't know what you're talking about." Claire pulled out a tablet, sliding it down the table. "Banking records. Amazing what a good forensic accountant can find when properly motivated. You've been feeding Richard information for months, meeting with him, planning this. You can't prove—" "I can, actually. You see, David, when you met with Richard last week at that charming little bar on Rush Street, you didn't notice the security camera across the street, or the fact that Richard, desperate and sloppy, kept every text you sent him." David lunged for the door, but Ethan was ready. He caught the man's arm, twisting it behind his back in one smooth motion that sent David to his knees. "I wouldn't," Ethan said quietly. "I've had a really long week." Security arrived moments later, the real security, not the compromised ones David had been counting on. As they led him away, David turned back to Claire. "You think you've won? You have no idea what's coming. Richard was just the beginning." After he was gone, the remaining board members sat in stunned silence. Claire stood smoothing her skirt with steady hands. "Anyone else have concerns about my leadership they'd like to discuss?" No one spoke. Good. Then I moved to dissolve this board effective immediately and reconstitute it with members who actually support this company's vision. All in favor. Margaret's hand shot up first, followed slowly by others. When the vote was counted, it was unanimous. No one wanted to be seen opposing Claire after what they'd just witnessed. As the board members filed out murmuring amongst themselves, Claire finally allowed herself to sag slightly against the table. You okay? Ethan moved beside her. That was terrifying. You didn't look terrified. You looked like you were born to do that. Smoke and mirrors. Inside, I was screaming. She looked up at him. Thank you for stopping David. That's the job, right? No, she said softly. That's you. Before he could respond, his phone rang. Mrs. Rodriguez, and she was crying. Ethan, something's happened. Emma, she's gone. The world tilted on its axis. Ethan gripped the edge of the boardroom table, his knuckles white, the phone pressed so hard against his ear he could hear his own pulse. What do you mean she's gone? His voice came out strangled, unrecognizable. Mrs. Rodriguez was sobbing, her words coming in fractured pieces. I walked her to school like always. She went inside. But the principal just called she never made it to class. The security footage, someone took her from the playground. A man. Ethan, I'm so sorry. I thought she was safe once she was inside the gate. Claire grabbed the phone from his trembling hand. Mrs. Rodriguez, this is Claire Donovan. Where are you now? She listened, then turned to Ethan. She's at the school. We're going. The next minutes blurred together. Claire barking orders into her phone, security materializing from nowhere, the elevator descent that seemed to take years. Ethan couldn't breathe, couldn't think beyond the image of Emma, his baby, his whole world scared and alone with a stranger. We'll find her, Claire said, gripping his hand in the SUV. I promise you we'll find her. This is because of me. Because I got involved with you. The words came out harsh, accusatory, but Claire didn't flinch. Yes, she said simply, and I will never forgive myself for it. But right now, blame won't bring Emma back. Focus will. The school was chaos. Police cars, parents gathered in worried clusters, Principal Martinez looking haggard as she spoke with detectives. When she saw Ethan, her face crumpled. Mr. Cole, I'm so sorry. He had identification, said he was your brother, that there was a family emergency. Emma seemed to recognize him, went willingly. We should have called you first, but show me the footage. The security video was grainy but clear enough. A man in a baseball cap and sunglasses keeping his face turned from the cameras. But Emma did go with him without struggle, even held his hand. Ethan's stomach twisted. Who would she trust enough to leave with, that's not my brother, I don't have a brother? Detective Morse arrived, having been pulled from Richard's case. Mr. Cole, Ms. Donovan, we've issued an Amber Alert. Every cop in the city is looking for Emma. It's Richard, Claire said with certainty. Or someone working for him. This is retaliation for the board meeting for David's arrest. We don't know that. Claire's phone rang. Unknown number. She answered on speaker. Hello, Claire. Richard's voice smooth and mocking. Missing something, or should I say someone? Ethan lunged for the phone, but Claire held up a hand mouthing Trace to Detective Morse. Richard, if you hurt her. Hurt her. I'm not a monster, Claire. The little girl is fine. Eating ice cream, actually. Strawberry, I believe. She's quite charming. Takes after her father. What do you want? Claire's voice was steady, but Ethan could see her hand shaking. What I've always wanted. What was stolen from me. The company. Sign it over, all of it, and the girl goes home safe. You know I can't do that. The board? You just dissolved the board. Remember your little power play this morning that makes you sole decision maker until a new board is constituted. You have 3 hours to transfer ownership. I'll call with instructions. Richard, please. 3 hours, Claire, or Ethan learns what real loss feels like. The line went dead. Ethan was moving before anyone could stop him out the door down the hall. Claire caught him at the SUV. Where are you going? To find my daughter. How? We don't even know where they are. I know Richard. I studied him when you hired me. He's arrogant, needs to feel in control. He'll He'll keep her somewhere familiar, somewhere he feels powerful. His penthouse. Too obvious. The police will check there first. Ethan thought furiously. You said he had gambling debts. Where did he gamble? Private clubs mostly, but there was one place. The Riverside Casino. He had a suite there, used it for meetings he didn't want on the books. That's where she is. Detective Morse had followed them out. We can't just storm a casino on a hunch. Then I'll go alone. Ethan, that's insane, Claire protested. You're injured. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking perfectly clearly. My daughter is with a man desperate enough to commit murder. Every second we waste arguing is a second she's in danger. Claire turned to Detective Morse. Get a warrant, whatever it takes. Then to Ethan, we're not letting you go alone. Claire, non-negotiable. Emma is important to me too. We do this together. The ride to the casino felt eternal. Ethan's mind kept conjuring horrible scenarios, each worse than the last. Emma crying for him. Emma hurt. Emma afraid. His hands clenched and unclenched the movement, pulling at his stitches until fresh blood spotted his shirt. Tell me about the ice cream, Claire said suddenly. What? Emma's favorite, strawberry. Tell me about it. Ethan recognized what she was doing, giving him something to focus on besides the terror. She's been obsessed with strawberry everything since she was 3. Sarah used to make homemade strawberry ice cream for her birthday. I tried to continue the tradition, but mine never tastes quite right. You'll make it for her next birthday. Together we'll figure out the recipe. How can you be so sure? Because the alternative is unacceptable. Claire's voice was steel. We're getting her back, Ethan. Richard might be desperate, but he's not stupid. He knows hurting a child would destroy any leverage he has. The Riverside Casino was a gleaming monstrosity on the water, all glass and false promises. Claire walked in like she owned it, which Ethan realized she probably could. Ms. Donovan? The manager appeared as if summoned. We weren't expecting Richard Hawthorne's suite. Now. I'm sorry, but Mr. Hawthorne's arrangements are private. Claire leaned in close. In about 30 seconds, this place is going to be swarming with police. You can either help me now and possibly salvage your reputation, or you can explain to your investors why you harbored a kidnapper. The manager's face went pale. Suite 2012, but security? Will let us pass, Claire finished. Make the call. They took the elevator to the 20th floor, Ethan's heart hammering against his ribs. Claire had called for backup, her security team the police, but they were minutes behind, minutes Emma might not have. The hallway was empty, eerily quiet. Suite 2012 was at the end, its door slightly ajar. Trap, Ethan whispered. Obviously. Claire pulled out her phone, typing rapidly. But Richard always did underestimate me. She pushed the door open. The suite was luxurious, all marble and leather, and wasted money. Richard stood by the window, looking exactly as polished and empty as his photograph. Another man, muscle-bound and scarred, stood guard by a closed bedroom door. Claire. And the hero warehouse worker. How touching. Richard's smile was all teeth, no warmth. Though you're early, I said 3 hours. Where is she? Ethan's voice was barely human. Safe, for now. Richard gestured to the bedroom. Would you like to see her? Through the door, of course. Can't have you trying anything heroic again. The guard opened the door a crack. Ethan could see Emma sitting on the bed coloring in a book, seemingly unharmed. She looked up at the sound. Daddy. I'm here, baby. Everything's going to be okay. The man said you sent him, but Mrs. Rodriguez always says to wait for you, and I forgot, and I'm sorry. It's not your fault. Just keep coloring. Okay, I'll be there soon. The door closed again. Ethan turned to Richard, rage making his vision red at the edges. She's 7 years old. And leverage. Nothing personal. Richard moved to the bar, pouring himself a scotch with steady hands. You know, Ethan, may I call you Ethan? None of this had to happen. If Claire had just been reasonable during the divorce, accepted my terms, shared what was rightfully mine. Nothing about the company was rightfully yours, Claire said. You married me for it, but my father saw through you. That's why he left it to me alone. Your father was a fool, sentimental, Weak. Richard's mask slipped slightly, showing the ugly desperation beneath. I spent 5 years playing the devoted husband, 5 years of pretending to care about your little environmental crusade, and for what? To be cast aside the moment Daddy died. You cast yourself aside the moment you hit me, Claire said quietly. Ethan went very still. He hit you. Only once. The night after my father's funeral, when he found out about the will. I left the next day. You never said, what was there to say, that I was another statistic, another successful woman who chose the wrong man? Claire's voice was bitter. The board already thought I was too weak to lead. Imagine if they'd known I couldn't even manage my own marriage. Richard laughed an ugly sound. Still playing the victim, Claire. You destroyed me. My reputation, my connections, my future, all because of one moment of frustration. One moment. Claire pulled out her phone, swiping to a folder Ethan hadn't seen before. Medical records, photos of bruises. Should I count the other moments, Richard? The push down the stairs that you convinced me was an accident, the grabbed wrists, the thrown glasses, ancient history, but Richard's face had gone pale. None of that matters now. Sign the papers, and everyone walks away. I've got a better offer, Claire said. You release Emma. Now turn yourself in, and I don't release these records to every media outlet in the city. You might avoid jail time for the kidnapping claim. It was a misunderstanding. You thought you were helping. But attempted murder, conspiracy, assault, those are harder to explain. You wouldn't. The scandal would last a news cycle. My company would survive. Your reputation wouldn't. Richard's hand was shaking now, scotch sloshing in the glass. You've destroyed everything else. Why not my last shred of dignity? Because I'm not you, Claire said simply. I don't enjoy causing pain. Release Emma, and this ends. For a moment, Ethan thought Richard might agree. His shoulders sagged, the fight seeming to drain from him. Then his eyes hardened. No, I've come too far to walk away with nothing. He pulled a gun from his jacket, pointing it at Claire. Sign the papers or I paint this room with your blood. Then the kid disappears. You think I'm working alone? I have partners, Claire. People who want your technology, your patents. They'll raise the girl, maybe? Or maybe she ends up in the system. Foster care is rough for pretty little things like her. Ethan moved without thinking, stepping between Claire and the gun. You'll have to shoot me first. The hero again. How tedious. Richard's aim shifted to Ethan. Fine. You first, then her. The kid will have quite the trauma to process. Richard! A new voice from the doorway. David Morse walked in, flanked by 2 men in expensive suits. This wasn't the plan. Plans change, David. Your arrest necessitated improvisation. My arrest was temporary. My lawyers will have me out within the hour. But this, David gestured at the scene, kidnapping a child, murder. This isn't what we agreed to. We agreed to remove Claire from power. This accomplishes that. We agreed to a hostile takeover, not a massacre. David pulled out his own gun, pointing it at Richard. Let the girl go. You spineless... The window exploded inward. Claire's security team rappelling from the roof, Detective Morse and the police bursting through the main door. Richard spun, firing wildly. Ethan felt the bullet whisper past his ear, saw Claire dive behind the couch, heard Emma scream from the bedroom. The bodyguard by Emma's door reached for his weapon. Ethan crossed the room in 3 strides, his injured arm screaming as he tackled the man. They crashed into the wall, grappling for the gun. The man was bigger, stronger, but Ethan had desperation on his side. He thought of Emma feet away, terrified, and found strength he didn't know existed. The gun went off deafening in the enclosed space. The bodyguard went limp. Ethan rolled away, covered in blood, not sure if it was his or the other man's. He crawled to the bedroom door, throwing it open. Emma was under the bed, hands over her ears, crying. Ethan pulled her out, wrapping his body around hers. It's okay, baby. I've got you. I've got you. The suite was suddenly full of police EMTs' chaos. Someone was reading Richard his rights. David was already in cuffs, trying to negotiate with anyone who would listen. Claire appeared at Ethan's side, her perfect suit torn a cut on her cheek. She's okay. Ethan held Emma tighter, feeling her heart race against his chest. We're okay. But they weren't, not really. Emma was clinging to him like she had when she was 3 and scared of thunderstorms. Ethan's entire body was one large bruise, his reopened wounds seeping through the expensive suit. And Claire. Claire looked shattered, the weight of what had almost happened crushing her. "This is my fault," she whispered. "All of it." "No," Ethan said firmly. "This is Richard's fault, David's fault, the fault of greedy small men who couldn't stand to see you succeed." Detective Morse approached them. "We need statements, but it can wait. EMTs want to check you all out first." "I want to go home," Emma said, her voice small. "Can we just go home?" Home. Their tiny apartment that now seemed like the safest place in the world. But Ethan looked at Claire, saw the isolation settling over her like a shroud, and made a decision. "We're all going home. Together." Claire looked up surprised. "Ethan, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do. You're not going back to that empty penthouse tonight. You're coming with us." For once, Claire didn't argue. The apartment had never felt smaller than it did with Claire Donovan, sitting on their second-hand couch, still in her torn designer suit, holding a cup of tea Mrs. Rodriguez had pressed into her hands. Emma was tucked between them, refusing to let go of Ethan's hand, even as exhaustion pulled her toward sleep. "Tell me the story," Emma requested, her usual bedtime demand. "Which one, baby?" "The one about the princess who saved the kingdom." Ethan usually embellished fairy tales for Emma's bedtime stories, but tonight the words wouldn't come. Claire spoke instead, her voice soft. "Once upon a time, there was a princess who thought she had to save the kingdom all by herself. She built tall walls around her castle and worked day and night to protect her people. But the walls that kept danger out also kept friendship out. Love out. Life out." Emma's eyes were growing heavy. "That's sad." It was, until one day a knight appeared, not a perfect knight in shining armor, but a real knight with dents in his armor and scars from old battles. He had a daughter, the bravest little girl in all the land. Like me. Exactly like you. And the knight and his daughter showed the princess that kingdoms aren't saved by one person standing alone. They're saved by people standing together, protecting each other, choosing to be brave even when they're scared. Emma was asleep before the story ended, but Claire kept talking, her words now meant for Ethan. The princess learned that strength wasn't about being untouchable. It was about being touched by life, by love, by loss, and choosing to remain open despite the risk. The knight taught her that just by being himself. "How does it end?" Ethan asked quietly. Claire looked at him over Emma's sleeping form. "I don't know yet, but I hope they all live happily ever after, even if ever after is complicated and messy and nothing like the fairy tales promised." "The best stories usually are." Mrs. Rodriguez bustled in from the kitchen where she'd been pretending not to eavesdrop. "The child needs her bed. You both need rest and proper food. I'll make soup." As Ethan carried Emma to her room, he heard Mrs. Rodriguez speaking to Claire in rapid Spanish, then slower English. "You love them, both of them." "I've known them a week," Claire protested. "And love doesn't follow schedules. It comes when it comes. The question is what you do with it." Ethan tucked Emma into bed, kissing her forehead, checking the window locks twice. When he returned to the living room, Claire was crying silently, tears streaming down her face while Mrs. Rodriguez rubbed her back. "Hey," he said softly, sitting beside her. "It's over. Everyone's safe. I almost got her killed. Your baby, your whole world almost died because of my baggage. But she didn't. She's here, she's safe, and tomorrow she'll probably ask if she can visit your office to see those robots you mentioned." Claire laughed through her tears, a broken sound. "How can you not hate me?" "Because none of this is your fault. Because you stood between Richard and Emma without hesitation. Because—" He paused, weighing his words. "Because in 1 week, you've brought more light into our lives than we've had in 3 years. I've brought danger and chaos. You've brought purpose and possibility." He took her hand, threading their fingers together. "Emma and I were surviving before you, just going through the motions day after day. Now we're living. That's worth any risk." "You can't mean that." "I've never meant anything more." Mrs. Rodriguez returned with bowls of soup that none of them could eat. The The events of the day sat heavy in the room, the what-ifs and might-have-beens haunting every corner. "I should go," Claire said eventually. "Let you rest. Stay." Ethan. "Stay. Sleep on the couch. Be here when Emma wakes up. She'll need to see you're okay, too." "Why would she need to see me?" "Because she loves you," Ethan said simply. 7-year-olds don't do complicated. She loves you, and she'll need to know you didn't leave because of what happened. Claire looked around the tiny apartment, the crayon drawings on the walls, the framed photos of Sarah, the life built from love and loss and determination. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll stay." Later, after Claire had fallen asleep on the couch, wrapped in Emma's favorite blanket, after Mrs. Rodriguez had gone home with promises to check in tomorrow, Ethan sat at his kitchen table and tried to process the day. His daughter had been kidnapped. He'd killed a man. Claire's ex-husband was going to prison. The board of Donovan Industries was in chaos. And somehow, in the middle of all that violence and terror, something else had crystallized. He loved her. This brilliant, broken, brave woman who'd crashed into his life a week ago. It was too fast, too complicated, too everything. But it was also undeniable. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "This isn't over. David and Richard were amateurs. The real players are coming. Protect her. A friend." Ethan deleted the message, but the words lingered. He looked at Claire sleeping on his couch at Emma's door at the life they were trying to build from the wreckage. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The media would descend the story of the CEO and the warehouse worker who saved her going viral. There would be questions, investigations, threats both old and new. The fairy tale was far from over and not all dragons had been slain. But tonight his daughter was safe in her bed. The woman he was falling in love with was safe in his home. And for now that was enough. He checked the locks one more time, then settled into the chair beside the couch where he could watch over both of them. Guardian, protector, father, and maybe something more. The sun would rise on a changed world tomorrow, but tonight in this small apartment above the city, they were together. They were family, even if none of them were quite ready to say it yet. Ethan closed his eyes, listening to the synchronized breathing of the two people who'd become his entire world. Whatever came next, whatever battles they'd have to fight, they'd face them together. The night, the princess and the bravest little girl in all the land. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was better. It was real. The morning came too bright and too early sunlight streaming through the thin curtains of Ethan's apartment. Claire stirred on the couch, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. The expensive suit she'd slept in was wrinkled beyond salvation, her hair a mess, and yet she felt more rested than she had in months. "Ms. Claire?" Emma bounded into the living room, apparently none the worse for yesterday's trauma. "You stayed. Dad said you might, but I wasn't sure, and Mrs. Rodriguez is making pancakes, and she said you can have some if you want." The words tumbled out in that breathless way children had of making everything urgent and wonderful. Claire sat up, trying to smooth her hair, acutely aware of how she must look. "I'd love pancakes," she said, and Emma beamed. Ethan emerged from the kitchen, coffee in hand, dark circles under his eyes, suggesting he'd slept little, if at all. Their eyes met across the room, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of what they'd survived, what they'd almost lost, what they might be building. "How did you sleep?" he asked. "Better than I have in years," Claire admitted. "Your couch is more comfortable than my $5,000 mattress." "That's because it comes with family sounds," Mrs. Rodriguez said, appearing with a plate stacked high with pancakes. The refrigerator humming, the neighbors arguing about soccer, Emma talking in her sleep. "These are the sounds of life, mija. Your penthouse is too quiet." As they gathered around the small kitchen table, Claire's phone began its insistent buzzing. 17 missed calls from Marcus, 43 from various board members, and over 100 emails marked urgent. She turned it face down. "The world is looking for you," Ethan observed. "Let it look. I'm having pancakes with people who actually care if I'm alive." But the world wouldn't wait long. Within an hour, reporters had gathered outside the building, having somehow discovered where Claire had spent the night. The story was too juicy to ignore billionaire CEO saved by single father, dramatic kidnapping, love blooming amid danger. "They're making things up," Claire said, reading the headlines on her phone. "Romance in the face of death. From warehouse to penthouse, a modern Cinderella story. They don't know anything about us. They know enough. Ethan said quietly. They know I care about you. That's probably obvious to anyone watching. Claire looked up from her phone, searching his face. Ethan? A knock at the door interrupted whatever she might have said. Not the polite tap of Mrs. Rodriguez or the familiar rhythm of Emma's friends, but sharp, authoritative. Ethan checked the peephole, then opened the door to reveal a tall, silver-haired man in a suit that made Claire's designer outfit look off the rack. His eyes were the same shade of blue as Claire's, his bone structure an older, masculine version of hers. Uncle Jonathan. Claire breathed, and Ethan heard layers of history in those two words. Jonathan Donovan stepped into the apartment, his gaze taking in everything. The modest surroundings, Ethan's protective stance, Emma peeking out from behind her father, Claire looking more disheveled than he'd probably ever seen her. Claire, we need to talk. How did you find me? I own shares in the company that operates the traffic cameras. Finding you was simple. Understanding why you're here instead of dealing with the crisis at the company that's more complex. There is no crisis. Richard is in custody. David is cooperating with authorities, and 3 more board members have called emergency meetings. The Japanese investors are threatening to pull out. The stock has dropped 12% in overnight trading. Jonathan's voice was calm, almost gentle, but Ethan recognized the steel underneath. You're the CEO, Claire. This is when you need to be at the helm, not playing house in... He gestured vaguely at the apartment, whatever this is. This is my friend's home, Claire said, standing straighter. The friend who saved my life, twice. Jonathan's gaze shifted to Ethan, assessing. Mr. Cole, I've read about you. Warehouse worker, single father, hero of the moment. How much... Excuse me? How much to walk away? I can have a check written within the hour. Enough to set you and your daughter up for life. All you have to do is disappear. Emma made a small sound of distress, pressing closer to Ethan. Claire stepped between them, and Jonathan fury radiating from every line of her body. How dare you? I dare because someone needs to protect you from yourself. This man and his child are liabilities, Claire. Weaknesses your enemies will exploit. They're not weaknesses. They're the first real thing in my life since Dad died. Your father would be appalled to see you like this. He built an empire, and you're letting it crumble for what? A fairy tale romance with someone completely unsuitable. My father would have loved Ethan, Claire said quietly. He would have respected a man who puts family first, who acts with honor, even when it costs him everything. Dad would have loved Emma too, would have seen himself in her curiosity and determination. Your father was a businessman. My father was a human being first, something you forgot long ago, Uncle. Jonathan's composure cracked slightly. I'm trying to protect you, the company, your legacy. I don't need protection. I need support. And if you can't provide that, then you can leave. For a moment, uncle and niece stared at each other, decades of family dynamics playing out in silence. Then Jonathan turned to Ethan. You seem like a decent man, Mr. Cole, but decency won't protect her from what's coming. The attack on Claire wasn't just about Richard's petty revenge. There are forces at play here you can't imagine. International competitors who want her technology, governments who fear what her innovations mean for their economies, established energy companies who stand to lose trillions if her solar breakthrough reaches market. Then we'll face them together, Ethan said simply. Together. Jonathan laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're injured, untrained, and have a child to protect. What exactly do you think you can offer? Something you can't, Claire interjected. He can offer me a reason to fight that has nothing to do with stock prices or market share. He and Emma remind me why the work matters, creating a better world for the next generation, not just accumulating wealth for its own sake. Jonathan studied them both for a long moment. You're in love with him. It wasn't a question, but Claire answered anyway. Yes. Ethan's heart stopped, then resumed at double speed. They hadn't said the words, had barely acknowledged what was growing between them, and here she was declaring it to her disapproving uncle like it was the simplest truth in the world. And you, Jonathan asked Ethan, are you in love with my niece or with what she can provide? I fell in love with her before I knew she could provide anything except the possibility of getting stabbed in an alley, Ethan replied. The money, the company, the complications, I'd happily live without all of it. but I can't live without her. Emma tugged on Ethan's shirt. Dad, are you and Ms. Claire getting married? The adults all froze, the innocent question hanging in the air like a challenge. It's complicated, baby, Ethan started, but Claire knelt down to Emma's level. Not yet, she said gently. But maybe someday if your dad agrees and you're okay with it. Would you be okay with it? Emma considered this seriously. Would you live here with us? We might find a bigger place where we could all be comfortable. Can Mrs. Rodriguez come too? If she wants to. Then yes, Emma decided. You make Dad smile like he used to when Mom was here. That's good, right? That's very good, Claire agreed, blinking back tears. Jonathan observed this exchange with something shifting in his expression. When he spoke again, his tone had changed. Your father proposed to your mother in an apartment not much bigger than this, he said to Claire. Before the money, before the company became what it is. She said yes, because she saw who he could become, not who he was. He looked at Ethan. Maybe I've been looking at this wrong. Uncle, the board is meeting in 3 hours. If you're not there, they'll vote no confidence and remove you as CEO. But if you show up with Mr. Cole, make it clear that this is your choice, your life, your decision that might actually strengthen your position. Because it shows you're not afraid. Not of them, not of public opinion, not of anything. Your father's greatest strength was his fearlessness. Maybe it's time you reminded them you're his daughter. Jonathan moved toward the door, then paused. Mr. Cole, that offer stands, but for a different reason. Not to leave, but to stay. Professional security training, a proper team, whatever you need to keep them safe. Both of them. After he left, the apartment felt smaller, the weight of decision pressing down on all of them. You don't have to come to the meeting, Claire said to Ethan. This could get ugly. The press will dig into everything: Sarah's death, your finances, every mistake you've ever made. Will you be there? Of course. Then I'll be there. Dad has to wear his nice suit again, Emma announced. The one that makes him look like James Bond. Despite everything, they laughed. But the laughter died as Claire's phone rang. Marcus, and from her expression when she answered, the news wasn't good. What do you mean, evacuated the entire building? She listened, her face paling. A bomb threat. Are you... Yes, I understand. No, I'm safe. I'm with Ethan. She hung up, hands trembling slightly. Someone called in a bomb threat to the Donovan building. They're evacuating all 40 floors. The message said this was just the beginning unless I step down. We're going to the police, Ethan said immediately. No, we're going to the building. If I don't show up, if I let them see fear, it's over. Everything my father built dies. Claire, this is insane. This is my life. The words came out sharp, desperate. Don't you understand? If I back down now, they win. All of them. Every person who said a woman couldn't run this company, every competitor hoping to steal our technology, every small mind that can't stand to see someone like me succeed. Someone like you. Young, female, unwilling to play by their old boys' club rules. She was pacing now, energy crackling around her like electricity. My solar technology could revolutionize energy access in developing nations, could literally save the planet from climate disaster. And they want to stop it because it threatens their profit margins. Then we fight, Ethan said. But we fight smart. You don't walk into a building that might explode. The bomb squad is already there. They'll clear it. And if they don't, if this is real, Claire stopped pacing, turning to face him. Then I die doing something that matters, protecting something worth protecting. Isn't that what you did? Stepping in front of that knife? That was different. How was it different? Because I was protecting a person. You're protecting a company. I'm protecting the future. The words echoed in the small apartment. Every solar panel we produce, every innovation we develop, every barrier we break, it all matters. It all adds up to a world where Emma and kids like her don't have to inherit our disasters. Emma had been quietly coloring during this exchange, but now she looked up. Ms. Claire, are you a superhero? The question broke the tension, Claire's anger deflating. No, sweetheart. I'm just trying to do the right thing." "That's what superheroes do," Emma said, matter-of-factly returning to her coloring. Ethan's phone buzzed. The unknown number from last night. "Building is clear, real threat isn't there. It's at the board meeting location. They've moved it to the Whitmore Hotel. Presidential suite. Don't trust anyone. A friend." He showed the message to Claire. "Someone's helping us. Or leading us into a trap. Only one way to find out." They made an unlikely procession, heading to the Whitmore Hotel, Claire in her wrinkled designer suit, Ethan in his funeral-turned bodyguard attire, Emma insisting on coming because families stick together, and Mrs. Rodriguez refusing to stay behind with her children, heading into danger. The hotel lobby was swarming with security reporters and board members. The moment Claire entered, cameras started flashing questions, flying like bullets. "Ms. Donovan, is it true you spent the night with your bodyguard? Are you stepping down as CEO? What's your response to claims that you're emotionally unstable?" Claire walked through them like they were ghosts. Head high. Ethan at her right side, Emma holding her left hand. The image would be on every front page tomorrow, the billionaire and the warehouse worker's daughter, fingers intertwined. The elevator to the presidential suite was private, requiring a special key. Marcus was waiting, his usual composure cracked. "Claire, thank God. It's chaos. Half the board wants you out immediately. The other half is fighting about who should replace you. And there's something else." The elevator doors opened to reveal the suite transformed into a boardroom battlefield. Men in expensive suits clustered in groups, voices, raised papers scattered across every surface. They all turned when Claire entered conversations, dying mid-sentence. "Gentlemen," Claire said coolly, "and Margaret, I understand there are concerns." "Concerns?" A red-faced man Ethan recognized as Gerald Whitmore, the hotel's owner and a major shareholder, stepped forward. "You've turned this company into a circus. Attacks, kidnappings, your personal life splashed across every tabloid. My personal life is not up for discussion. It is when it affects stock prices," another man shouted. "We've lost hundreds of millions in value in 2 days." "Paper losses," Claire countered. "The fundamentals haven't changed. Our technology is still revolutionary. Our contracts are still solid. The only thing that's changed is that some of you have shown your true colors." "What's that supposed to mean?" Claire pulled out her phone, connecting it to the suite's presentation system. "I've had an interesting morning. My uncle, who some of you know, has access to certain resources. Traffic cameras, financial records, communication logs. The screen filled with data phone records, emails, financial transactions. Gerald, you've been in contact with Petrolin Industries for 3 weeks, discussing the sale of our solar patents if I were to be removed. Thomas, you've been shorting our stock while publicly supporting me making millions off the volatility. And Margaret," Claire's voice softened slightly, "you've been feeding information to the press trying to position yourself as my replacement." The room erupted in denials, accusations, lawyers, threatening lawsuits. Through it all, Claire stood calm in the center of the storm. "Enough," the voice came from the back of the room. An elderly man Ethan didn't recognize walked forward, leaning heavily on a cane. "Ms. Donovan is right. We've all been plotting, scheming, focusing on personal gain instead of the company's mission." "Mr. Yamamoto," Claire said, inclining her head respectfully, "I didn't know you were in town. I arrived this morning when I heard about the troubles." Yamamoto was Ancient, one of the original investors in Claire's father's company. "Your father saved my family's business, once took a chance on us when no one else would. I've watched you these past 5 years, Claire. You have his vision, his courage, and now, like him, you have someone willing to stand beside you against any threat." His gaze moved to Ethan. "You are the warehouse worker who saved her." "I'm Ethan Cole." "Just Ethan Cole. No pretense, no agenda. How refreshing." Yamamoto turned to address the room. "I motion to dissolve this board and reconstitute it with members who remember what Donovan Industries stands for." "All in favor." "You can't do that," Gerald protested. "You don't have the authority." "I own 30% of this company," Yamamoto said quietly. "Combined with Claire's 25% and the proxies I've collected from other shareholders who are tired of these games, I have more than enough authority." The vote was swift and decisive. Within minutes, most of the board was dismissed. Their security badges deactivated before they even left the suite. Only Margaret remained looking stunned. "Why keep me?" she asked Claire. "After what I did?" "Because you're brilliant at what you do. You let ambition cloud your judgment, but your insights about our Asian markets have been invaluable. Everyone deserves a second chance. Don't waste yours." As the former board members filed out, Yamamoto approached Ethan and Emma, who'd been watching the proceedings with wide eyes. "Young lady, what did you think of all that?" Emma considered the question seriously. "It was like when the mean kids at school try to take over the playground, but Ms. Claire showed them she's in charge." "An excellent summary. You have a future in business?" "I want to be a scientist, or maybe a dragon trainer." Both noble professions. Claire was surrounded by the remaining board members and senior staff handling a dozen crises at once, but her eyes kept finding Ethan across the room as if confirming he was still there, still real. Marcus appeared at Ethan's elbow. "She's good at this, the crisis management, the corporate maneuvering, but she's different with you here. More human." "She was always human." "Was she? I've worked with her for 5 years and I've never seen her smile the way she does when your daughter talks to her. Never seen her look as peaceful as she did walking in here holding both your hands despite everything happening around her." "What's your point, Marcus?" "My point is that you're good for her, and she's probably good for you. But this world—" He gestured at the opulent suite, the lawyers and assistants buzzing around. "This world will try to eat you alive. It doesn't like outsiders, doesn't like change. You'll need to be stronger than you've ever been. I survived the south side of Chicago. I survived losing my wife. I survived a knife meant for Claire. I think I can handle some rich people's disapproval." Marcus smiled slightly. "You know what? You just might." The afternoon stretched into evening crisis after crisis being handled, plans being made. Emma had fallen asleep on one of the suite's massive couches, Mrs. Rodriguez watching over her. Ethan stood by the windows, watching the city lights come alive when Claire finally broke free from the crowd. "Hi?" she said, leaning against him slightly. "Hi. How are you holding up?" "I just fired 70% of my board, discovered multiple conspiracies against me, and essentially declared war on the entire traditional energy sector. So typical Tuesday." "Is it always like this?" "No," she said softly. "Sometimes it's worse. And you choose this every day." "I choose to fight for what matters. The method might be corporate warfare instead of street fights, but it's still fighting for something bigger than myself." She turned to face him. "But I don't want to do it alone anymore." "You're not alone." "I know. That's the miraculous part." She glanced around, making sure no one was within earshot. "Ethan, what I said to my uncle about being in love with you, was it true?" "Every word. I know it's too fast, too complicated, but—" He kissed her, cutting off her explanations. It was their first real kiss, not a grateful peck on the cheek or a moment of comfort, but a declaration. When they pulled apart, several board members were staring. Marcus was trying not to smile, and Emma had woken up. "Finally," the little girl announced, "Mrs. Rodriguez owes me $5. She said you wouldn't kiss for another week." The room laughed, tension breaking. Even the serious Mr. Yamamoto cracked a smile, but the moment of levity was short-lived. Claire's phone rang Detective Morse. "Ms. Donovan, we have a problem. Richard Hawthorne made bail again, and he's disappeared." Claire's phone slipped from her fingers, clattering on the marble floor. The sound seemed to echo in the sudden silence that had fallen over the suite. Ethan caught her arm as she swayed slightly, the color draining from her face. "How?" she whispered into the phone she'd retrieved. "How does someone with attempted murder charges make bail twice as—" Detective Morse's voice was tight with frustration, audible even from where Ethan stood. Different judge, different lawyers. They claimed the kidnapping was a misunderstanding, that he thought he was protecting the child from a dangerous situation. The attempted murder charge was reduced to assault based on technicalities about intent. $2 million bail paid in cash within an hour. "Who has that kind of money?" Ethan demanded, taking the phone from Claire's trembling hand. "Richard was supposedly broke. That's what we're trying to figure out. Mr. Cole, you need to get Ms. Donovan somewhere safe. Richard's not operating alone anymore. This is bigger than a domestic dispute or corporate takeover. The suite had gone quiet, everyone listening despite attempts to appear otherwise occupied. Mr. Yamamoto approached his cane, tapping against the floor in a measured rhythm. "Perhaps," he said carefully, "it would be wise to move this gathering to a more secure location. My company maintains a safe house outside the city, completely off the grid state-of-the-art security." "I'm not running," Claire said, her voice gaining strength. "That's what they want, whoever they are. They want me to hide to show weakness." "Claire," Marcus interjected, "this isn't about showing weakness. This is about survival. You can't run the company if you're dead." Emma had moved closer to her father, picking up on the tension despite not understanding the details. She slipped her small hand into his, and Ethan felt the familiar weight of responsibility, but now it was doubled. He had 2 people to protect 3 if he counted Mrs. Rodriguez, who was muttering prayers in Spanish while clutching her rosary. "There's something else," Detective Morse continued. "We found David Morse's body an hour ago. Staged to look like suicide, but forensics suggests otherwise. Whatever he knew, whoever he was working with, they cleaned up that loose end." Claire sank into a chair, the weight of it all finally showing. "David's dead. I'm sorry, Ms. Donovan. I know he betrayed you, but he was still a person, a stupid, greedy person, but he didn't deserve to die." She looked up at Ethan. "How many more people are going to die because of me?" "Because of them," Ethan corrected firmly. "The people doing this are responsible, not you." His phone buzzed. The unknown number again, Whitmore Hotel, compromised. Multiple hostiles en route. Northwest service elevator is clear for next 3 minutes. Black SUV and loading dock, keys under driver's seat. Trust no one else. A friend. Ethan showed the message to Claire and Yamamoto. The old man's eyes sharpened. "Interesting. Someone is playing guardian angel." He raised his voice slightly. "Everyone remain calm, but we're implementing evacuation protocol. Security teams to their positions." But even as he spoke, Ethan noticed something wrong. 2 of the security guards near the main elevator were checking their watches too frequently, their hands hovering near their weapons. Another was speaking quietly into a phone, which was odd since they should have been using official radios. "Claire," he said quietly, "we need to go. Now." She didn't question him, that trust that had been building between them, requiring no explanation. She stood smoothing her skirt with hands that barely trembled. "Emma, baby, we're going on an adventure," Ethan said, keeping his voice light despite his racing heart. "A scary adventure?" his daughter asked, too perceptive as always. "Maybe a little scary, but we'll be together." Mrs. Rodriguez crossed herself. "Dios mío, not again." They moved casually toward the back of the suite, Claire pausing to speak with various people as if nothing was wrong. But Ethan saw her whisper urgently to Marcus, and Yamamoto saw them begin their own subtle movements toward exits. The service elevator was exactly where the message had indicated. As the doors closed behind them, Ethan heard shouts from the suite, the sound of doors being kicked in. They'd gotten out just in time. The descent seemed to take forever. Emma pressed between the adults, Mrs. Rodriguez praying steadily. When the doors opened on the loading dock, the promised SUV was waiting, engine already running. Ethan checked underneath, no bombs, inside no obvious threats. The keys were indeed under the driver's seat, along with a burner phone and a note. "Drive north, cabin address programmed in GPS, friends waiting." "This could be a trap," Claire said, even as she helped Emma into the back seat. "Everything could be a trap at this point," Ethan replied, sliding behind the wheel. "But staying still definitely gets us killed." They pulled out of the loading dock just as black vans screeched up to the hotel's main entrance. Armed men in tactical gear poured out, definitely not standard law enforcement. "Mercenaries," Claire breathed. "Someone hired actual mercenaries." Ethan drove with controlled urgency, not fast enough to draw attention, but quick enough to put distance between them and the hotel. The GPS directed them north out of the city into the darkness of rural Illinois. Emma had fallen asleep against Mrs. Rodriguez, the exhaustion of the past days finally claiming her. Claire sat in the passenger seat, her phone dark in her lap. "I should call the FBI," she said. "Homeland Security, someone. And tell them that mysterious forces are trying to kill you, that you're getting help from an anonymous source. They'll think you're paranoid." "Aren't I?" "No, paranoid implies the threat isn't real. This is very real." They drove in silence for 20 minutes before Claire spoke again. I'm sorry I dragged you into this. You didn't drag me anywhere. I jumped. Why really? Why? And don't say it's because you love me. You didn't love me when you stepped in front of that knife. Ethan considered the question, the dark highway stretching ahead of them. My whole life I've watched from the sidelines, watched other people succeed, watched Sarah get sick, watched our savings disappear. I was so focused on just surviving that I forgot what it felt like to actually do something that mattered. Saving a stranger's life matters. It was more than that. It was choosing to act instead of just react. For the first time in 3 years, I made a choice that wasn't about merely getting through another day. He glanced at her. And then you turned out to be you, and suddenly I had more choices. Bigger ones, scary ones, but all of them about living instead of just surviving. I don't want you to die for those choices. I don't plan to, but I also don't plan to go back to that half-life I was living before. The GPS directed them off the highway onto increasingly narrow roads. Forest pressed in on both sides, the darkness complete except for their headlights. Finally, after an hour of driving, they arrived at a modest cabin that looked abandoned from the outside. But as they parked, lights came on and a familiar figure stepped onto the porch. Jonathan, Claire gasped. Her uncle looked different, dressed in tactical clothing instead of his usual suit, a rifle held casually but competently in his hands. Took you long enough, he said. Come inside, we have a lot to discuss. The cabin's rustic exterior was a lie. Inside was state-of-the-art security equipment, computers, weapons, and supplies for a long siege. 2 other people were present, a young woman with multiple laptops open before her, and a massive man who looked like he could bench press a car. Claire, meet my real team, Jonathan said. Not the corporate lawyers you usually see, but the people who actually keep our family safe. Our family has a private military, Claire asked, stunned. Your father's money came from somewhere before the legitimate businesses, Jonathan said carefully. He left that world behind, but he knew it might follow him, follow you. So he made arrangements. You're telling me Dad was what, some kind of crime lord, more like a very successful smuggler who went legitimate, but he made enemies in his previous life, and those enemies have long memories. Richard was never the real threat, Claire. He was just a tool being used by much more dangerous people. The young woman at the computer spoke up. I'm the one who's been sending the warnings. Name's Alex. Your uncle hired me to monitor threats against you, but I had to stay hidden until now. Why? Ethan demanded. Why all the secrecy? Because someone in Claire's inner circle has been feeding information to her enemies for years, Jonathan said. Not David, he was recent. Someone else. Someone close. Claire's phone rang. Marcus. Don't answer that, Jonathan said sharply. Marcus has been with me since right before your father died. Convenient timing. Jonathan pulled up files on one of the screens. Marcus Webb. Impressive resume. Harvard MBA, worked for 3 Fortune 500 companies before joining Donovan Industries. But dig deeper and things get interesting. His previous employers all suffered massive losses after he left. Industrial espionage was suspected but never proven. No. Claire shook her head. Marcus has been loyal. He's helped me through everything. Has he been positioning himself as indispensable while feeding information to competitors? Alex pulled up financial records. Offshore accounts in his name totaling $50 million. Payments received over the past 5 years, all from shell companies linked to Petrolin Industries. Claire stared at the evidence, her world reshaping itself once again. Petrolin. They've been trying to buy our solar patents. And Marcus has been helping them position for a hostile takeover. Richard was Plan A, marry into the company, gain control. When that failed, Plan B was to destabilize you enough that the board would sell. When you proved too resilient, Plan C was simply eliminating you. Emma stirred in Ethan's arms, mumbling in her sleep. He carried her to one of the bedrooms, Mrs. Rodriguez following to watch over her. When he returned, Claire was pacing, energy crackling around her like a storm. 5 years. 5 years of trusting him, confiding in him. He knew about Richard's abuse because I told him. He knew my schedules, my fears, my plans, everything. Which is why we're going to use that against him, Jonathan said. Marcus doesn't know we're on to him. He thinks you're still at the hotel or heading to one of your known safe houses. We can use that. How? You're going to call him, tell him you're scared that you need his help. Arrange a meeting somewhere we control. When he shows up, we take him and anyone else involved. Use me as bait. Use yourself as the queen on the chessboard, Jonathan corrected. The most powerful piece, but also the most valuable target. No, Ethan said flatly. Absolutely not. We're not dangling Claire in front of these people like meat before sharks. It's not your decision, Claire said quietly. The hell it isn't. You want to talk about choices? This is mine. I choose not to let the woman I love walk into an obvious trap. Even if it's the only way to end this. There's always another way. Not always, Jonathan interjected. Sometimes the only way out is through. Claire understands this. It's why she's survived this long in a world that wanted to destroy her. The argument might have continued, but Alex suddenly sat up straight. We have a problem. Multiple vehicles approaching from the south. Military-grade heat signatures. They found us. Jonathan moved with surprising speed for his age, grabbing weapons and tossing them to the massive man. Paulo defensive positions. Alex wipe everything and prepare for evac. Claire, Ethan, get the child and the old woman. Back exit leads to a boat dock. Take the speedboat, head north across the lake. There's another safe house on the Canadian side. What about you? Claire demanded. We'll buy you time. Uncle, this is what your father paid me to do. Protect you when he couldn't. Jonathan checked his rifle with practiced efficiency. 20 years ago, your father saved my life. Let me return the favor. Gunfire erupted from the tree-lined windows, shattering. Ethan threw himself over Claire, pulling her behind an overturned table as bullets chewed into the walls. Emma! He started to rise, but Claire held him down. Mrs. Rodriguez has her. They're safe in the back room. Paulo returned fire from a fortified position, his massive frame somehow graceful as he moved between windows. Alex worked frantically at her computers, presumably destroying sensitive data. Go! Jonathan shouted. Now! They crawled toward the back room, splinters raining down as automatic weapons turned the cabin into Swiss cheese. Ethan kicked open the bedroom door to find Mrs. Rodriguez huddled in a corner with Emma shielding the girl with her own body. We're leaving, he said, scooping Emma up. She was awake, terrified, but silent, her arms tight around his neck. The back exit was clear, but the 100 yards to the boat dock stretched like miles. They ran in a crouch, Claire leading Ethan, carrying Emma. Mrs. Rodriguez struggling to keep up. Behind them, the gunfire intensified, explosions now mixing with the automatic weapons. The speedboat was a sleek thing built for exactly this kind of escape. Claire jumped in, turning to help Mrs. Rodriguez while Ethan passed Emma down. As he climbed in himself, men emerged from the forest, weapons raised. Claire had the engine started before they could fire, the boat lurching forward as bullets sparked off the hull. Ethan pulled everyone down, covering Emma and Mrs. Rodriguez with his body as Claire drove with desperate skill. Where did you learn to drive a boat? He shouted over the engine. Summer camp, she shouted back. Very expensive summer camp. Despite everything, he laughed. Here they were fleeing for their lives across a dark lake toward Canada, and she was making jokes about her privileged childhood. The gunfire faded behind them, but Claire didn't slow down. The boat flew across the water, bouncing off waves, spray soaking them all. Emma was crying now, the silence broken, and Mrs. Rodriguez was praying louder than the engine. There! Claire pointed ahead where lights marked another dock. That must be it. But as they approached, Ethan saw figures waiting. His heart sank until he recognized one of them. Detective Morse, flanked by what looked like FBI agents. Federal agents, someone shouted through a megaphone, cut the engine and prepare to be boarded. Claire complied, and within minutes they were surrounded by officials, weapons drawn, but not quite aimed at them. Ms. Donovan, Detective Morse said, helping them onto the dock. We've been looking for you. How did you find us? Your uncle called it in. Said you'd be coming this way, that you had evidence of international corporate espionage and conspiracy to commit murder. My uncle called you when? 3 hours ago, right after he confirmed Marcus Webb had hired the mercenaries. Claire stared at her. 3 hours ago, we were still at the hotel. How could he have known? Because I've been watching Marcus for months. Jonathan's voice came from behind them. He walked up somehow uninjured despite the firefight they'd just fled. The cabin attack was staged. My people firing blank special effects for the windows. We needed Marcus to believe he'd succeeded in flushing you out. You lied to us. Claire's voice was dangerous. You terrified Emma for a ruse. I did what was necessary, and it worked. Marcus is in custody along with 6 Petrolin executives who were waiting at the actual safe house to finish what Richard started. The FBI has everything financial records communications proof of conspiracy reaching to the highest levels of the energy sector. Claire slapped him. The sound echoed across the water, everyone freezing in shock. You used a child as a prop in your game, she said, voice shaking with fury. You traumatized an innocent little girl for what? To catch some corporate criminals. To save your life, Jonathan replied, rubbing his cheek. And hers, and his. Do you think Marcus would have stopped? Do you think Petrolin would have given up? They would have hunted you forever, and anyone close to you would have been collateral damage. We could have found another way. There was no other way that ended with certainty. Now it's over. Really over. Is it? Ethan asked Emma, still clinging to him, her tears soaking his shirt. Because from where I'm standing, we've got a traumatized child, an elderly woman who shouldn't have been involved in any of this, and a whole lot of broken trust. Trust, Jonathan said, looking at Claire, is a luxury in our world. Results are what matter. No, Claire said firmly. Trust is everything. It's the difference between surviving and living, between being alone and having a family. She moved to Ethan and Emma, wrapping her arms around both of them. This is my family now, and if you ever put them at risk again, uncle or not, I'll destroy you. Jonathan studied them for a long moment. Your father would be proud. He was soft like that too in the end. It's why he got out of the game. He turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I am sorry about the child. That wasn't supposed to be part of it. After he left, they stood on the dock in the cold night air, a strange group, a billionaire CEO, a warehouse worker, a traumatized child, an elderly neighbor, and various federal agents trying to figure out what to do with them. Ms. Donovan, Detective Morse said gently, we need statements, but it can wait until morning. There's a hotel nearby. No hotels, Claire said quickly. No more hotels or safe houses or secure locations. I want to go home. Your penthouse? No. Home. She looked at Ethan. Can we go home? He understood. The apartment small and cramped and ordinary. The place where they'd shared pancakes and stories, where Emma felt safe, where life was real instead of performed. Yeah, he said softly. Let's go home. The FBI drove them back to Chicago, the sun rising as they reached the city. The apartment building looked exactly the same as if the past 24 hours hadn't happened, as if their entire world hadn't tilted off its axis multiple times. Mrs. Rodriguez kissed them all and retreated to her own apartment, muttering about needing tea with brandy in it. Lots of brandy. Emma had fallen asleep again, and Ethan carried her to her room, Claire following. As he tucked his daughter in, Emma opened her eyes briefly. Miss Claire. Yes, sweetheart. Are the bad men gone now? Claire knelt beside the bed, smoothing Emma's hair. Yes, they're all gone. You're safe. Are you staying? Claire looked at Ethan, a question in her eyes. He nodded. I'm staying, she promised. Emma smiled and drifted back to sleep. They stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her breathe, reassuring themselves that she was really okay. In the living room, exhaustion finally claimed them. They collapsed on the couch, Claire still in her destroyed designer suit, Ethan, in clothes that had seen too much action for one lifetime. It's really over, Ethan asked. The conspiracy is, Marcus is going to federal prison. Petrolin is under investigation. Richard, she paused. Richard will probably disappear into witness protection after he testifies. He knows too much for them to let him walk free, but not enough to be worth killing. And you, I have a company to rebuild, a board to reconstitute, technology to bring to market. She turned to face him. But I don't want to do it alone. I want you with me, both of you. Claire, I'm not a corporate guy. I don't know anything about renewable energy or hostile takeovers, or you know about loyalty, about protection, about doing the right thing even when it costs everything. She took his hand. I need that. The company needs that. Someone who sees through the noise to what actually matters. What are you saying? I'm saying I love you. I'm saying I want to wake up next to you and Emma every morning. I'm saying I want to try to build something real together, even if it's complicated and messy and nothing like either of us planned. Ethan thought about the strange journey that had brought them here. A week ago, he'd been nobody special. Now he was sitting next to one of the most powerful women in the country, and she was asking him to share her life. I need to keep working, he said. Not at the warehouse, but something. I need to contribute. Head of security for Donovan Industries pays well. Excellent benefits. Your boss is supposedly difficult but fair. Supposedly? I hear she's mellowing, something about a 7-year-old's influence. He laughed, pulling her closer. All right, but we do this as equals. No more secrets, no more protecting each other from hard truths. We're partners or we're nothing. Partners? She agreed, sealing it with a kiss that tasted like promise and possibility. Outside Chicago was waking up. The sun painted the buildings gold, the city humming with its usual energy. Inside the small apartment, a new family was forming from the ashes of violence and betrayal. Not the family any of them had planned, but the one they'd chosen. Claire's phone buzzed with messages, the board, the media, the endless demands of her position. She turned it off, choosing instead to stay in this moment, in this place, with these people who'd become everything. What happens tomorrow? Ethan asked. Tomorrow we start rebuilding. The company, our lives, everything. It won't be easy. Nothing worth doing ever is. From her bedroom, Emma called out, Dad, Ms. Claire, can we have pancakes? They looked at each other and laughed, the sound filling the small apartment with something that had been missing for too long, joy. Pancakes it is, Claire said, standing and pulling Ethan up with her. But I'm warning you, I don't actually know how to cook. Good thing I do. Good thing indeed. As Ethan started mixing batter and Claire attempted to help, while mostly getting in the way, Emma emerged from her room dragging her favorite blanket. She climbed onto a kitchen stool, watching them with eyes that were older than they should be, but still held that spark of childhood wonder. Are you going to get married now? She asked with her characteristic directness. Claire and Ethan exchanged glances. They'd been through more in a week than most couples experienced in a lifetime. But marriage seemed both inevitable and impossibly far away. Someday, Ethan said carefully, when we're ready, when you're ready too, Claire added to Emma. This is your family. You get a say. Emma considered this seriously. I want a fancy dress, and Mrs. Rodriguez has to come, and no bad men with guns. Deal, Claire said solemnly. No bad men with guns at our wedding. Our wedding, Ethan repeated, tasting the words. A week ago, he'd been a widower convinced he'd never love again. Now he was planning a future with a woman who'd turned his entire world upside down. As they ate pancakes and Emma regaled them with plans for their theoretical wedding, Claire's phone rang again. This time it was Mr. Yamamoto. I should take this, she said apologetically. Speakerphone, Ethan said. Partners remember. She smiled and answered on speaker. Mr. Yamamoto. Ms. Donovan, I wanted you to know that the emergency board has voted. You retain your position as CEO with full support. Additionally, we've approved your solar initiative for immediate implementation. We're going to change the world, my dear. We're going to try, Claire said, her eyes on her new family. Also, Yamamoto continued, I've taken the liberty of arranging something. Check your email when you have a moment. Consider it a gift from an old man who remembers what it's like to be young and in love. After he hung up, Claire checked her email. Inside was a deed to a house. Not a mansion, but a real house with a yard and enough bedrooms for a family in a neighborhood with good schools and tree-lined streets. He bought us a house, Ethan said, stunned. He bought us a future, Claire corrected, a place to build from. Emma looked at the pictures on Claire's phone. Does it have room for a dog? Probably, Claire said. Then I approve. And just like that, their future took shape. Not the one any of them had imagined, but one forged in fire and chosen in love.